What up, y'all? It's your boy, One Sir Grove. This is episode 87 of Casting 495 Celebrities Worldwide. Man, temperature is getting down. It's getting down. No humidity. It's football season. Football's being kicked off. It's the fall season, y'all. So, man, I hope everyone's having a blessed day, night, evening, wherever you are in the world. And today's topic is how when we were growing up, we walked everywhere, man. How we, coming from a middle-class family with friends who were middle class, sometimes we were low income, and then we get higher income. During the time of the era of the 1980s going into the 90s, a couple homies would have a ride, in other words, a whip, a car, and we'd be rolling. But before that, and even during that time, we walked everywhere, man. It wasn't like today where you just push a button and, some car service comes, picks you up because you got an app on your phone. We didn't even, man, honestly, out west, we didn't even take taxi cabs. It ain't like the East Coast where taxi cabs are all over the place. It wasn't the same, man. And, it's interesting because we had to put ourselves in the mindset of being foot soldiers. Like, we had to soldier, like, as a posse, as a crew, as a team, as an organization. It was no joke. Like, to get around town, we also had the bus, the transit system. And where I used to live back in the day, the bus was pretty reliable. But, it stopped running at a certain time. It wasn't 24/7, and it wasn't major city. It was a small town of less than 100,000 people. So the bus, though it was there, depending on where we were going, there might not have been a bus. And a lot of times there wasn't. So to get around by ourselves, and I'm talking about like parties and stuff like that. So it's not like we could just ask like mom, dad, grandma, someone, hey, could you give me a ride here? Man, it was just us in the neighborhood. We're going to go to these parties, man, and there ain't no mom, dad, or grandma at that time that's going to fucking take us where we need to go, right? So, 1980s, 1990s, we walked, man. We'd sometimes, man, our whole neighborhood would just be in the streets, just going somewhere. And late night, we'd have 40s, we'd have our beer, we'd have our bottles, we'd have our cans and shit, we'd have our weed pipes and shit, and we'd just be fucking have our backpacks, have our fucking, we were soldiered up, man, on the streets, man. Utility. We used to wear the cargo pants. We had the triple fat goose jacket, the goose down jackets. We had parkas. We had winter gear. We had fall gear. And that was what it was about, man. Like having the layers, the beanie cap. We had the ball caps because shit, man, it would fucking rain quite a bit. And the weather wasn't extreme, but there was a lot of precipitation, a lot of wind, a lot of rain and overcast. And so in the Pacific Northwest, man, Puget Sound and up and down the coast there from the Bay Area of California and back is green, and it tends to rain quite a bit, man. So it's like being in the mountains, close to the clouds and shit. And so we were we're from that atmosphere and from that environment, and we would be trooping, man. We were fucking troopers. And so since we were kids growing up playing in those streets with skateboards and BMX bikes and shit, we did a lot of BMX extreme biking, stunting on the bikes and skateboards and just walking, man, just fucking foot soldiering. Bro, I'm saying to you, man, we go to football games across town. It would take us it'd take us a half an hour to walk from North EVT. Let me see. Man, to walk from North EVT, man, it might take like an hour, man, just to get to the football game. Because we'd be fucking getting our drink, or already have it, because someone in the hood who was of age would buy it for us. So we'd have our drink, and we'd have our smoke, and have our weapons and shit, and we'd fucking, just like the movie The Warriors. If y'all ain't seen it, the movie The Warriors, that was us, man. That really was. It was like that. That's exactly how we were. I mean, I'm being 100% fucking serious. I mean, that's how a lot of crews in America were. And man, we'd start off like, it'd be like a handful of us, and then as we walk down the street through our hood, we just knock on the homie's door, and then someone else would be with us, then we'd be a few other doors down, and then we knock on that homie's door, and we just keep going like that. That's how we fucking roll. By the time we got up to the event, man, there might be 151 of us, man. I mean, for real, like, I'm talking like a marching band, like motherfucking, like, we were in the streets deep. And that's why, and that's how we came up with Deep in Everett. D-I-E, Deep in Everett, because we were deep in the streets like that. And so we got recognized and gained notoriety by being massive, by being huge, like tremendous, right? We had an enormous fucking crew from the Riverside. We also had cats from the Bay Side with us, as I've talked about in these podcasts. And when we gained notoriety, when we became notorious, when we became infamous in the minds of some, rivals and opponents back then, when we became mega, other kids were inspired by us, right? So it wasn't just the Riverside. It wasn't just the Bayside. Then we had cats from the South Side start to get on with us because they'd see us over the years, and we grew in numbers. And there were kids around town and young adults that were like, yo, we're deep in Everett too. We're DIE. We're deep in Everett. It's the whole city. It ain't just the Riverside boys. Man, we part of this too, man. We South Side EVT, and we on with this, man. We part of this shit. We deep in Everett too, man. We Riverside too, because they'd come to the Riverside where it started, and the Bayside where it started. Technically, man, deep in Everett, DIE actually started on the Bayside in the basement of my cousin's home, and my cousin Rizzo, and with the homie Aaron, and the homie JKT, and some other cats, man. There were 6 of us, and that's how it all began. And then it grew, and it became this citywide network. And then from that, cats in other cities started to hear about us and know about us, and they wanted to get down and come to the historic Riverside District and Bayside with the parties that we had throughout the city. And then we turned it into an enterprise. Yeah, that was the era. So what's the trip, man, is that when you look at the Northwest, right, and how, like, back in the 80s and 90s, I mean, there was racism like anywhere, man. I mean, obviously you got, like, hate groups and shit. People that just be hating other groups and shit, so they be a hate group. But, man, honestly, like, a lot of people don't understand the Northwest, man. They hear about Seattle, and they're like, oh, man, Seattle is like L.A. It's like a city. Well, it is a city, man, but it's not really a big city. It's more of a town, and that's why cats out there call it the town, right? I come from a town, north, you know what I'm saying, of Seattle. And so out west, man, like, there's a lot of towns that dot the coast, right? They're like, dots, like, around the coast. And the thing about it racially and demographically speaking is that right outside, see, man, you got cats, man, and see, like I have relatives that wear like cowboy hats. You feel me? Like Washington State, man, is a rural, like has a lot of rural communities, man, and like agrarian communities. Like the eastern part of the state is a fucking desert. You feel me? Like, so people, they think that Seattle's like Los Angeles in the sense that it's like, you know, I don't know what the fuck. I mean, I know what they think, but it's like I almost said I don't know what the fuck they think. I was just saying that for effect. But yeah, they expect it to be something that man. I'm telling you, look, there's a lot of country out west, man. Like a lot of country, and so growing up, man, like anywhere, man, you had racism. Like in California, you know, fucking anywhere you go in the world, there's gonna be some racism and shit. But because of like the demographics, like you got cats out west who are like black, African American, as you would say, and they rock chain wallets, man. They rock Doc Martens and shit, and they be into like rock music and shit. You know what I mean? And like, and it's dope like that. I mean, I grew up like that. I grew up skateboarding like that, man. You got, you know, man, dudes in the punk rock and metal and shit. And it's like, and so white dudes out west, like where I'm from, they understand that relationship between the different ethnic groups, man. Like growing up, I used to fucking roll with stoners though. Like I rolled with stoner crews, bro. Like stoner gangs and shit. And fucking skateboarders. And cats that like were like outlaw niggas that like fucking, you know, like, man, there's hobo gangs, bro. I mean, niggas that be like hobo ganging, bro. Like they on some gang shit and they be hobos and shit. I knew niggas that were like living off the land, like down by the railroad tracks, and they were selling China White, bro. And they had like 20 grand rolled up in their socks and shit. Like living outside, but having like 20 fucking grand cash. You know what I'm saying? Living the life of a hobo, but ain't really hobo, but hobo at the same time. You feel me? I'm talking like grunge shit, bro. I'm talking about some grimy shit. Like, man, so out west, man, there'll be like parties that be like down by the river and out on someone's property with the bonfire and shit. Like, I know biker niggas. I know black dudes that roll bikes, white dudes that roll bikes. Like, I mean, man, you gotta understand, the shit out west, a lot of it is farmlands, country roads, forests, mountains, hills. You understand? And so, man, when you grow up out west where I come from, man, being a foot soldier, like, you had to know how to navigate that shit. You know, we go to a party out in the woods and shit. We go to a party in the mountains and shit. We go to a party out in the country. Like, you had to know how to operate like that. So really what it boils down to is that it was all very clannish. Everyone really was part of a clan. It was very tribal, very clannish. And when you would communicate with people, just like in any society, any civilization, when they would see you for the first time, when you would speak to them for the first time, there was a mutual understanding, like a meeting of the minds, like-mindedness. And that's really the gist of it, man, is that, you know, not even color-wise, like, I mean, regardless, what I'm saying is regardless of color, when you lived in the Northwest, man, back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and you looked a certain way, like, cats knew, like, in some way, like, depending on how you were dressed and how you appeared, they knew that you were, like, from the Northwest. You know what I mean? Like, they understood that, okay, this dude, he might be a black dude, you know, but he's from the Puget Sound. He's from the Northwest. You feel me? Like, you just tell by talking to him, like, immediately, like, just his lingo, like, you know, just how he's, like, you know, he's just grunged out And I don't mean grungy, like looking like disheveled, but I'm just saying, like, when you grew up out west, man, you could just tell, man, like back then, you're just like, oh, these niggas, they from like Bremerton, or you know what I'm saying? They from like Everett, or like these niggas is Tacoma niggas, these niggas is Seattle niggas. Oh, them niggas right there, they from out in Bellevue. Like, you just kind of had a sense about it back then, man. And you know how it is wherever you be at, man. If you're in California, you know, there's certain codes and shit, like niggas be in gangs, and you see them and you like, all right, this dude he got this number, this monogram, this letter, this code and shit. Like, this nigga be from this gang, right? From this set, from this, you know? And so like out west, you see a cat, like growing up, man, he got a chain wallet, he got Doc Martens, he got a skinny puppy, he got a skinny puppy shirt on. Y'all ain't hip to skinny puppy, man. A lot of you, skinny puppy was a band. You had DRI, you had punk bands, you had, man, fucking, bro, growing up, niggas was on like the skate shit, like thrashing, like Thrasher. Oh my God, man, we used to skate hard. And, you know, man, so really, like, a lot of us just growing up out west, we played sports. And it started with sports. It started with school, learning shit from, like, uncles and men and women in the, like, how to build shit, how to, like, make shit, how to be outside, how to pitch a tent, how to camp, you know, how to boat, how to ride a fucking dirt bike, you know, how to hike in the mountains and shit. And that's what the fuck we did, man. So when it came to the time when gangs came, and well, I mean, you know, there were always gangs, and I talk about this, but I'm talking about the migration of gangs from California upward, like up north. Man, I mean, shit. If you've seen the movies where there are house parties that are so large in size and scope, that's how that was the lifestyle, man, for like shit 20 years. It was just like going from house party to house party, mi casa, you casa, right? And cats would just be like crashed out, wake up, go to another party, nigga passed out, wake up, shake it off, go to another party. And it was just tribal, just living like that, man. We'd be out on native lands with our native homies and shit, out on the res, as they would call it back in the day, man. The res, short for Indian, you know, reservation, which they used to call it. But, you know, it's the native lands, right? Tribal lands. And we just be out there, man. Just, you know, with the homies, man. Growing up with native homies, growing up with white homies, growing up with black homies, growing up with the Spanish homies, you know, the Mexican homies, man, you know, shit, bro. The West Coast is the trip. And man, that's how it was back then, for real. So truth be told, man, you had to put yourself in a military mindset. Even if you weren't in the military, even if you had no plans of going into the military, if you were never going to be in the military, you had to put yourself back then, seriously, man, in the 70s and 80s growing up out west, you had to say, man, you had to say to yourself, it was neuro-linguistic programming, man, because you out in the elements and you outdoors, and that's how people lived out there, man, as tribes and clans and shit. And they be on some fucking warfare shit back then, man. Like, for real. Like, I'm talking, man, people think that the South of the United States is outdoorsy, and cats be like agrarian and like rural and like country and redneck and hick and shit. Man, when niggas talk about like out here, like in New York and shit, the East Coast, the Northeast, when niggas be like, oh yeah, man, I always wanted to go to Seattle, I'm like, that's cool, man, check it out though. They have no idea, man, a lot of times. They all, in their minds, they're just like, it's just another city. They don't understand, man, did part of it be country as a motherfucker. Like, man, I used to go to this club, man. was one of the tightest clubs in the history of the world and shit. And sadly, what I hear from my people is that it shut down. But I knew the owner. It had been there. My boys and I, we used to do security operations. Like we would be the security dudes that would fucking guard the shit at nighttime, the money and everything. And like okay, so like my mother, a friend of hers from college, she got married to this dude who was a cop. He was a police officer in Compton, California. Real shit. My mother's white, and Caucasian, as a lot of people know. And so her friend, her friends, the couple that were married, they used to be out in this place called it's a place that is still called Woodinville. Woodinville is it's on the east side of King County. It's a nice, used to be, I don't know now, but I mean back in the 70s it was considered upscale, affluent, right? There's other cities out there, you can look them up on the map: Kirkland, Redmond, fucking Bothell, Bellevue, right? Just right out where Microsoft be at, man. Redmond, Bothell, different campuses and stuff like this. And back in the 70s and 80s, those were some of the most fucking upscale communities in relation to, in the context of the Pacific Northwest. So we used to go out to like wineries and like house seeing, like there would be days they'd have open houses and we'd be seeing the different homes and sipping the different wines and shit, man. And I was a runner. Like I used to run. I ran track and field. So when I was really young, my mother and I, man, I think I did my first 10K. I got the photo that I'm in where I'm wearing the tracksuit with the G-Nikes, the blue. I had the blue G-Nikes. Okay, when I say G-Nikes, when we say G-Nike, cats who don't know, I'm talking about the Nike Cortez. You got the leather Cortez and then you got the suede. I had the suede Nike that were blue. Keep in mind, I was 4 years old, going on 5. I did a 10K when I was 4 years old. It's real shit. I ran with my mother. She and I did a 10K when I was 4 years old because I was very energetic, man. I was already foot soldiering back then, right? And my mother was in the military. She was a military woman. So she used to run. She'd do track. And honestly, that's how I got into it, was from my mother. And my mother was a sci-fi fan. We used to watch sci-fi movies and shit, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and all this kind of stuff. She was really into military sci-fi because, I mean, think about it. She was in the Army and then the Navy, right? So she's around all this military stuff, and she was technologically advanced. She was a computer programmer, I mean, she worked in communications, and so she did crypto, cryptology, man. She was working with, crypto communications and shit. So, she probably saw some fucking aliens and shit, you know what I mean? I don't know, but you know what I'm saying? Like, she was into sci-fi, and she was also running, like in races and stuff. We didn't do any marathons or anything. Well, I'm going to get to that in a minute. But we used to run like 7K, 10K, and we used to run in those areas, like over in Woodinville. In fact, Woodinville is where I ran a 10K when I was 4 years old. No bullshit, man. I got the photo with the tracksuit. They gave me the certificate that said, you passed this thing, young man. And I got the package. They give you the gear and everything. And so I did that, and those areas back then, right? You had a lot of nice communities, man, in Washington. Gig Harbor, Oak Harbor, San Juan Islands and shit, where they shot the movie, filmed the movie Free Willy about the whales and shit. And I used to be up there, man. They got a lot of nice communities up there, man. Anacortes, Lopez Island, you feel me? And so up there, those communities, a lot of them were, in the context of the Pacific Northwest, they were exclusive communities, man. I mean, affluent, upscale communities. And so you really had to put yourself in a military mindset back then. It's so very much real, man. Because like I said, it was very clannish. it was very tribal, and you would often be like on tribal lands, right? And I actually used to live in an area that was I lived on tribal lands. I knew someone, we knew someone, and when I say we knew a dude who his parents, he was adopted, but he learned how to fly when he was young. He had so many flight hours and shit. And his family, they own a business in Alaska where they do commercial fishing, but they own the commercial fishing business. So they would go back and forth from Alaska annually, and they'd be up there in Alaska. And the dude that we know he was flying planes like the Barefoot Bandit and shit. If you look that up, Barefoot Bandit, dudes used to have to learn how to fly and shit when they were young, just because they'd be out on the land and you never know when you might have to fly. You feel me? So, knowing people like the dude that I'm referring to, not the Barefoot Bandit, but the dude that I know personally, and 495 knows, he when we were young, he was a gun enthusiast, had an arsenal and shit. Cause you be out in Alaska, man, you gotta be weaponed up, right? And just be out in the fucking, the Aleutian Islands and shit. Like when my grandfather was in World War II, you be out west, bro. It's all green. You got Burlington Northern, you know what I'm saying? Like Burlington Northern, as in like the town called Burlington, okay? And you got the railroad. When my grandfather came back from World War II, he had learned telegraphy, so he could do telegraph, like he could type Morse code. So he got a job when he came back from World War II, he got a job with the rail lines, like the trains and shit, doing the telegraphy for like switching the tracks and stuff like that. And he had a Honda bike. He taught us, the clutch and everything when we were like, man, I was riding on my grandfather's Honda bike on the back of the Honda when I was like 4 years old, and got pictures of it. And my cousin, my cousin Rizzo, he's my age, right? And so, my grandpa would have like both of us like riding the Honda. And then, what I'm saying? He taught us how to ride it ourselves. And I know this sounds fucking brazy, but man, back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s, man, it was a different world and shit. Like you'd be 4 or 5 years old learning how to ride a fucking Honda dirt bike. And then how to fix it if you needed to like fix the bike, right? And repair it and stuff like this. And then how to camp, with the pots and the pans and shit, and how to be up in the woods. He'd put us on his back, man, like literally like sling us over his back, and he'd be out hunting like bear and shit, man, like just fucking deer and shit, just crazy brazy shit, my brethrens. And but it's so true. And then like my grandmother, because she was German American, from a German American like immigrant family, she was German, grandfather English. She was into like nature, outdoors, hiking, and day trips out to the woods and shit. She was part of a mycological society, something like that. She was part of this community where they knew everything about like flowers. She could make these beautiful bouquets. I'm talking like exquisite bouquets that if you were to buy that from the florist, from the floral shop, shit would cost you like $100. She had her own rose bushes. She had everything, tulips, lilacs, man, you name it. My grandmother had an English style garden, like with raised flower beds, and she had all that stuff, man. She grew apples, plums, peaches, and she was very giving, very generous. People would come like down the street, and she would just be like, here's a rose. She'd cut the rose, she'd wrap it up, and give it to them, man. Beautiful bouquets, man. She did that just selflessly, man. And so, she'd see people that were kind of like poor, or they look hungry or something, they'd see apples on her property, she'd be like, no, here, take some apples with you. Like, take some plums, take some peaches. Like, shit that if you were to buy that in the grocery store, man, like out here on the East Coast, man, she'd give people like $20 worth of food, man. She'd give them like $100 worth of like bouquets and stuff like this. Man, I love my grandmother and my grandfather, man. And they were both U.S. military veterans, okay, armed forces. So, we had this property where my grandfather, he had money and she had money. They were retirees. They were both in World War II. They both had pensions, and we didn't hurt financially for anything. And I'm being honest, man. Like, that was the life that we lived out west, was that they were World War II veterans. We lived in a small town. My grandmother was from the mountains. Like, her family was from the mountains. Like, if you look at the U.S.-Canada border, my grandmother's family, where my grandmother was born, she was born in the mountains, in a mountain town. Like, I'm not talking the hills. I'm talking the mountains, okay? There's a difference between hills and mountains, and cats who understand, like, terrain and, topography and, Landsat images and shit. I'm not talking about the hills. My grandmother is from a mountainous community that is up in the fucking clouds, nigga, where there are clouds and shit, because it's the fucking mountains. And I'm talking the Pacific Northwest. So, yeah, man. So we used to go up there, and it's very close to the U.S.-Canada border. It's like a hop, skip, and a jump. And, I used to hike Mount Rainier, Mount Baker, I've been over by the Olympics and shit, the peninsula, and those are some of the highest mountain ranges in the Western Hemisphere. So we grew up doing shit like that, man. We grew up going up in the mountains, being out in the forest, being in the hills, running. Man, we used to we used to trek. We used to trek like all day long in the forest. Like, my cousin and I, like, and our friends and shit, my family, we own property, man. Like, my family owns property. And so, like, we used to be, there's an island, and we used to be like in the woods and shit, man, on this island. And we had, different family members that lived on that same island. And so, man, we'd just be out in the fucking forest of the Pacific Northwest, man, all day long as kids, playing, exploring, going up in fucking different, like, parts of the forest and shit. We'd be out there for shit the whole day. We come back at night, man. We used to camp out there, And so we weren't, man, when you grow up in that kind of like, depending on like how rugged, how thick it be out there and shit, man, we'd be in like places that, man, humans probably hadn't stepped, man, for hundreds of years, thousands of years, little pockets of the forest and shit, little places, man. Sometimes we get lost. We'd be lost for like 8, 12 hours, and we just circle back at some point like, damn, we fucking finally made it back. I'm talking, my cousin, man, he was actually on the news because he went with his school. They went up in the mountain, and he actually, when he zigzagged, he zagged when he should have zigged, or he zagged when he should have zigged, or zigged when he should have zagged. Man, they had to look for him, man, and that's just real shit, from history. Like, that's real talk. So, and it was on the news, but, he came back, man. He's a trooper, man. Cause he was in Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, and everything. And I used to tag along with their crew. They'd be like, yo, Grove, you want to come with the Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts for the day? We're going to go up to Mount Baker. We're going to go hike. We're going to hike Mount Rainier and shit. We'd be up there, man. We'd be out there. And my uncle, his dad, was in the military. And similar to my grandfather, my uncle, he got my grandfather's guns when my grandfather passed. Like, the gun cabinets transferred to my uncle, and the bike, the Honda. And so I grew up in, like, my uncle, not just my grandfather's like wood shop, metal shop, but my uncle's wood shop, metal shop. My uncle would be making stuff and, like, showing us how, like,
you outrig when, because my uncle owned boats and stuff like this. And so, like, we'd be out boating and, like, going for salmon and out crab, like getting crab, like I'm talking fresh, like crabs, like I'm talking about like crabbing, you know what I mean? And we have the whole, man, like we'd have it all going, man. We go clam digging, you feel me? Like river rafting, anything and everything conceivable outdoors. We've done that. We've done that, man. My grandfather, we went to this place called Deception Pass. Like if y'all know the Pacific Northwest, Deception Pass, man, I mean, bro, come on, man. I used to crisscross the mountains all the time. So, when niggas be talking about Seattle, I'm just like, oh man, you ain't been there before? They're like, nah, man, what's it like? Like, I heard about it. Like, I want to go there. And I'm like, okay, right? Man, it's a trip, brothers. Hey, but my uncle is the one who took my cousin and I to the gun range for the first time when we were kids. And that's where I learned how to shoot guns. My uncle and my grandfather taught my cousin and I how to shoot professionally because they were both in the military. And we would go to the gun range quite regularly. And we'd shoot every kind of gun you can think of, man. We had fucking 22 long rifles. We had 30-06s, shotguns, fucking, I mean, I'm talking this is West Coast shit. Like, my cousin, man, we got in trouble one time at the gun range because there would be an assortment of different types of weapons, man, right? And so, like, back in the day, I'm talking like back in the day, man, when it was a different world and shit. Shit you couldn't do at a gun range now, man. So I think we were like probably like 12 years old, but I remember it like today. And we used to go to different gun ranges, and so fucking. But we were at this one particular gun range that we had been to before, and my cousin, there was a dude that had this weapon. I won't say what it was, but my cousin. I mean, look, man, we learned gun safety, you know what I'm saying? Like from professionals. We took the classes because you had to take them back then. And my cousin and I've said this before, we were on the high school rifle team. So we learned how to shoot professionally, not just from people who had been in the military, but we learned from professionals outside the scope of those who were professionals in the military, like gun trainers, like gun experts, right? So we, my cousin, man, there's this weapon, and they knew at this range they had seen us as kids because my uncle would bring us there and whatnot. And this is before we were in high school. A couple years out, because in high school, see, I was on the rifle team when I was my sophomore year. And then going into my junior year. And so I would have been 14, going on 15. So I would have been 15. So this is when we're 12. So this is like 3 years before that. We're at this range, right? And my cousin and this dude was like, yeah, you can do this weapon or whatever if you want. My cousin was like, cool. Man, so at first my cousin, he's just hitting the target, like diligently, like meticulously, tediously. And they're like, right on. And he was steady, cool with it, had it all sighted up and shit. And they're like, right on. And then my cousin just starts thumping. This dude's like, what the fuck are you doing? And my cousin was still busting, dude. This is my white cousin Rizzo, man. My cousin was still dumping. And this dude, the dude that ran the range, comes running over with weapon in hand. He's like, listen, don't you ever motherfucking do that ever again. And he said, man, you will be banned from this gun range. Because my uncle was standing right there. And my uncle equally was like, man, man, he told my cousin Rizzo, man, he was like, man, he told my cousin Rizzo, man, he had some words with my cousin Rizzo after that, man, and it wasn't good, man. I mean, I'm talking verbal scolding, like, don't you ever, type shit. But Rizzo and I talked about it later, man, and I was like, dude, I mean, my cousin was 12 years old, bro, and it was just spit fire. Shit was dope. That was the 1970s. I mean, it was wrong. We shouldn't have been letting off like that. But you really had to be in a military mindset out west, man, because, man, you in the elements out there. And we would, this is real shit. We would travel, like, sometimes, man, we would trek. Like, my cousin on my uncle's side, they had the luxury vehicles, man, like Uncle Phil. They had the fucking, okay, so my uncle had the Saab 900 Turbo S. He had the Saab 900 Turbo S. He had the Mercedes. He had the old school, like back when the Suburbans first came out. He had both Suburbans. He had two different Suburbans. He'd get two of everything. A lot of times. He had the old school back in the old school. He had the Volkswagen. He had two Volkswagens. He had like I said, the Mercedes. Oh, he liked Audi. So he'd have a couple different Audis. So two Audis, two Volkswagens, Saab 900 Turbo S, two Suburbans. You feel me? This is back when this shit was like brand new. And so my uncle was balling. My uncle, he owned his own company. And his father had also been in the war, and his father was a code breaker. He was a code breaker and a radio operator. And he did work, man, that's like, classified shit. And so anyway, they had horse stables. So his family, we had the equestrian lifestyle. Like, we'd go ride horses, and that's where we learned how to ride horses, like with the saddle or bareback, you feel me? And how to just ride up in the hills and just be up in the mountains and just ride the horse, right? And we were riding horses when we were kids. And so my uncle, though he had luxury vehicles and whatnot, and we were privileged in that way, we also, we didn't have access to the cars all the time. And my uncle was like, y'all can't just be going out, like, taking the Mercedes Benz to a party where y'all gonna be out until like 2, 3, 4, 5 a.m. And I know that y'all drinking and shit. So we weren't rolling like that. You know what I mean? We had to walk and shit if we couldn't get a ride somewhere. So we used to walk marathons, bro. I'm going to tell you about that in a minute. So it is so absolutely 100% true that it is absolutely 100% absolutely fucking factual. Historically factual that we, by the way, this is a mobile podcast, just in case anyone doesn't know. Just tuning in and just kind of scanning through the podcast. You'd be like, man, you driving in this shit, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm not in a professional studio. Like, I don't make it sound all like clean and shit. This is a mobile fucking podcast. So, but yeah, man, we used to walk 20 miles a day, 25 miles a day, 30 fucking miles a day, 40, 50 miles. Like, you probably like, man, come on, bro. Like, so what y'all don't understand, man, is that there was no, like, first of all, the taxi service that is out on the East Coast, right, out here, there wasn't anything like that, man, out where I'm from. Like, you could catch a cab, but I don't think I ever caught a cab, man. Like, there might have been one fucking time, like, when, I don't even remember why we caught a fucking taxi. It was when we were fucking, when we were older and shit, and we were off in the game, like, fucking, you know what I'm saying, in the game on the streets and shit. There might have been a time. Oh, you know what? Yeah. We actually started, when I was in my 20s, we took cabs for a while because we were on this bowling league. And though the homies we were just like, there were times when we were fucking wasted, loaded, just like drunk as fuck, like just gone off the drink. And we'd have like an invite to like go somewhere, and we couldn't drive because we knew like at that point in the history of like the Pacific Northwest, like we couldn't ride dirty. Like we ain't gonna drunk drive like that though. You feel me? But we're gonna go to the next party. So yeah, there were times when we took a cab. We went, there was like, we did a little streak of cab catching when we used to go down to this bowling alley that doesn't exist anymore. They had this like 50-cent beer night when they were going out of business. But it was this like place where we used to, when we were kids growing up, they had arcade games there. And then, you know, we'd go with like family members that would bowl, like my mother bowled, and we knew some people that, you know, bowled and shit. And then when we got older, you know, and we weren't just going to the bowling alley for fucking arcade games and shit, like we did when we were kids. We were going to the bowling alley to bowl ourselves, man. We'd just be fucking drunk, be like, man, let's go bowling. And so then we joined a bowling. We started our own bowling league. And so yeah, man, we took some cabs few times, but in contrast to the East Coast, there was, I mean, aside from taking cabs like a fucking few times, right? The lifestyle out west was not, you didn't catch cabs, man. You just like, motherfuckers didn't do that shit, man. And we would walk if we didn't have a vehicle. Now keep in mind, this is before we were old enough to drive and have licenses, right? Like my first car, my homie just gave me a car. The homie Spank motherfucking T, that's his rap name. That's the homie from Riverside 151. And he rapped with us on the 495. He's 495. He's Riverside 495. He gave me my first car. He was my, we were roommates. You feel me? Like we had the spot, bro. Like I had the house, and he lived with me. I lived with him. And when I got my first place, which was a house, a standalone, I'm saying three bedroom, you know, white picket fence, 2-car garage with the RV on the property, right? When I got my spot when I was 19 years old, my parents were in the military, man, and they weren't around. So, you know, I took possession of the home when I was 19. And so Spank T, he came and he lived with me, and he gave me one of his cars, because T had vehicles, man. We were ballers, man. We were fucking hustlers and ballers, and we were fucking we were deep in the game. And we knew niggas that had car lots. We knew niggas that had okay, one of my homies, he had like 15 cars and shit like parked around town, because you gotta understand something. Back in the day, town that I'm from, like, man, shit ain't getting towed anywhere. Like, you just got to know where to park the car around town, then you have a car there. If you ever need access to that car, shit, you got a key, you know where the hidden key be, right? So, man, we had cars all throughout the city and shit when we were older, when we were off in our 20s and we were balling. But understand this. Before that, even though my uncle had luxury vehicles, if we wanted to go to parties and stuff like that, man, we walked. We might walk to a party like 15, because we ain't just going to one party necessarily. We're going to go to like 10 different parties throughout the night. 10 different, I'm talking 10 fucking parties. We lived that lifestyle, and we walked to each and every one of those parties, man. And we did so gleefully. We were delighted to do so, man. And that was just, we were accustomed to doing that, man. We were accustomed to walking throughout the town, throughout the city. And we would walk literally the equivalent sometimes. Because, man, it'd start off at the day. And, we ain't got access to a car, like, from the time that the sun come up. And so we just start walking. And, to go wherever we're going to go. We're going to go down to the arcade, play some games. We're going to go to the stove, get some, whatever. Get some chips, 7-Eleven, something, whatever, little foods and shit, AM, PM and shit, fucking Circle K, 7E, in other words, 7-Eleven. And so, that was the routine, is just walk into all the different spots, man. And then at nighttime, then the 10, 20, 100 parties jump off, man. I don't know if y'all understand, man. If you ain't from out west, it was like every house was a party house, like in a city of like less than 100,000. Like everybody party out west, man. I mean, unless you're part of a faith-based organization, like group, like community and stuff, and like you're against like gatherings and like, drinking and shit like that, man, out west, people, man, you party Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Every day of the week, man. Like when in my 20s, every day is a go out to the club day. Every night is a go out to the club night. There are no exceptions, man. It's like every fucking day was the day when you're like, you just knew that you was going to the club. And so, or wherever, to get some drink. And that's how the lifestyle has been out there. So it was not uncommon for us at all by any means to fucking to over the course of an entire day walk 20 miles, man, 25 miles throughout the entire day. Walk from one end of town back to the other end of town, back to the other side of town, back and forth all day long. And over that day, easily walk 20 plus miles, man. So we were doing that growing up, and it just became so natural for us to do that we were just foot soldiers, man. And we had that military mindset back then. And that's history. That's reality. And I'm One Sir Grove. I am your boy. Thanks for tuning in. Love y'all. Oh yeah. And by the way, man, we're working on this new 495 project, man. Did y'all know about that? We're working on the new 495 project. We got some new shit lined up, man, that cats are gonna be like, how did they do this? How did they pull this off? Like, what the fuck? This is brazy. Yeah, man, we working on some new projects, man. 495 teamed up with Level 4. And, man, brothers, sisters, brethrens, man, 495.